Greetings, salutations. Welcome back to another episode of the Decision Hour. I'm your host, Adam Bird. Folks, I am excited to be back behind the microphone. I went on a little bit of a hiatus over the summer, but in doing so, I've met some amazing people. And speaking of amazing people, I got an amazing guest for you guys lined up this week, and somebody who I just recently met. He's the founder of Operation Barbecue Relief. And while you're at it, since you're listening to the show right now, it means you're already on the internet. Open up another browser. I want you to go to this website, Operation Barbecue Relief. That's operationbbqrelief.org. Open this up, follow along. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Stan Hayes. Stan, how are you, sir?
Adam, I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Let's dive in a little bit about who you are. I met you recently at an event down in Clearwater, Florida.
Yeah.
Saw you and the team, and I was like, oh, barbecue. I love food. I'm a foodie. Everybody knows that. And we got to do a brief little interview that you could see on the Heroes Media Group YouTube channel right now. But talk a little bit about, who is Stan?
Well, that's a great question. I think a lot of my people would tell you that this guy with a big heart who is a driven individual.
Yeah.
Who comes from a corporate world of sales and background, but it really comes down to I found a passion to want to help people that I didn't know I had.
Yeah.
And it's what spurred the organization and spurred on the growth of where we are today in the organization. I mean, I went years without knowing I had this passion. And realistically, it's funny because after the organization was started and stuff, I have friends coming out going, I can see that side of you, that I didn't know was even there.
Well, let's back up. Because you mentioned the word passion, which I absolutely love when people bring up this word in finding what your passion is in life. Some people, unfortunately, don't ever do that. When did you find your passion and tie that in with the story behind
Sure.
Operation Barbecue Relief?
Yeah, so it ties in really very, very easily and well. So Operation Barbecue Relief was founded in May of 2011 after the Joplin tornado.
Oh,
so you think back, 14 years ago, Joplin was the second major tornado that year.
Yeah.
Tuscaloosa happened about 45 days earlier, 2 months, 45 days earlier. And that was the first tornado I ever remember where literally the Weather Channel has a helicopter or somebody in a helicopter following the storm path where you can still see the tornado in
Miles
front of
ahead,
you,
yeah.
creating this devastation. And I just remember watching that and just going, wow, look at that. Now, Tuscaloosa is quite a ways away from Kansas City, so really didn't think much about it. Fast forward to May of 2011, and one of the most deadly tornadoes ever to hit in the United States hits in Joplin, Missouri, 2.5 hours from my house.
Yeah.
And as my wife and I are watching that, and thinking about, oh my God, the devastation, the people, what they're going through, go to bed that night really with not really thinking about anything other than what people are, dealing with.
Yeah.
And the next morning, as I got up at Monday morning, because it happened on a Sunday late afternoon, getting ready to go to work. And my wife looks at me and she goes, you need to go. Being maybe a little bit of a smart ass, I'm sitting there going, yeah, I know I'm late. I'm running late today, for Monday morning staff meeting. And she's like, no, idiot. You should get the competition barbecue guys that you go and compete with in a parking lot to come together and just go cook for the community of Joplin. And, I probably looked at her like she had 3 heads or something. And she's like, I got to get going. And I ran out the door to head to work. But I didn't even make it a mile down the road. And what she said to me just started really clicking, who better than a bunch of barbecue guys who go and set up in a parking lot to compete against one another
Yeah.
with minimal needs to go down and just come together and cook for a community that's hurting. So, you know, I got on the phone to the guy who got me into competition barbecue, one of the 3 co-founders of the organization. I said, "Hey, Jeff, what do you think?" And before I finished the sentence, he's like, "Man, I've been trying to think of what we could do. I love this. Let's see if we can mobilize the barbecue community and go down to Joplin and just cook and feed people." Great. So 15-minute phone call, hatched a plan to go to Joplin. You know, I worked for an insurance company. I was going to find where they were setting up their, catastrophe, center and everything, and see if I couldn't get a corner of a parking lot that they might be setting up in, and piggyback a little bit off of them and just go and see if we could feed people. Went to work, told my boss what I was going to do. He said, "Go." Left the office, came home, packed up, and what did I do? I didn't grab my competition smoker. I didn't do that. I grabbed 2 coolers, filled them to the brim with as much ice as I possibly could. Because I was like, what is something that I think in the next 72 hours I may not be able to find in late May? And it was ice, so I left there, drove to Joplin, went to the location, found everything where we were going to be setting up the next morning, and ended up, sleeping on a friend's couch from the barbecue world. And the next morning we started setting up on a parking lot, Tuesday, less than 48 hours after the tornado came through. We were setting up smokers and rigs and, starting to cook. And we got Sam's Club involved, and Sam's Club had a barbecue series back then.
Yeah.
And so we went to those folks and said, "Hey, this is what we want to do." And they said, "Yeah, we'll start getting you some food to cook." And that was the start of it,
That was the very first. That was the first experience of this, and that's how it was born. That's
how it was born. But by day 3, we saw how much of an impact, because we thought we'd be there for 3 or 4 days and do a few thousand meals. Probably the first day we did over 1,000 meals.
You're kidding.
The first day.
Holy cow!
By day 3, we saw what the gap that existed when you have such a major disaster like this with so many people hurting, and the time it was going to take for the sustaining big boy organizations to get there and really be there for the months and years it may take, right? So for us, we're like, we can be this stopgap. And so we just kept cooking, and it was like anytime you started wondering where something was going to come from, you had a parking lot, you'd have a truck show up in the parking lot going, "Man, all my restaurants are closed and everything." My boss said, "Try to get rid of the bread and just donate it to somebody. Could you guys use bread?" And we're like, "Oh my God, we've been out of bread for hours now. This is amazing." And you'd start putting out on social media, "Hey, we need barbecue sauce." And next thing you know, that 2 days later, a FedEx vehicle with a pallet of barbecue sauce shows up, through FedEx going, "Hey, we're assuming you're the barbecue guys in the parking lot at the corner of 7th and Range Line. I've got a delivery for you." That's what it said. "Delivered to the corner of 7th and Range Line. Look for the barbecue guys."
How many days were you guys out there after that?
So we were there for about 13 days. Of that, we were really cooking and providing food for about 11 of it.
Yeah.
And at the end, we did over 120,000 meals out of a parking lot.
And this was 2000. What was it? 2011.
Yeah.
Jesus.
So that's when, by day 3, we knew we were going to turn this into a nonprofit. I tell everybody, day 3 was such a pivotal day for me and the organization. I left there going, "Man, I thought climbing a corporate ladder was important, being an executive and doing this in the corporate world." And I realized how screwed up my priorities were. That what I got from handing somebody something as simple as a pulled pork sandwich in their worst time of need turned into, realizing that, I was told, I'll tell this story and try to do it without crying or anything. So Day 3, like I said, it was a pivotal day for
Yeah.
us. Just everything that we were learning. But that day, I'm sitting there with one of the other co-founders, Will Cleaver, and Will and I are sitting there, and we're talking, and we watched this car pull in. It was like an old Cutlass, you know, Sierra, pulling in there like my grandma had, and it was just beat to hell. I mean, this thing had, cracked windshield, cracked glass, dents all over it from tree debris, I'm assuming, hitting it. And you couldn't see the person driving the vehicle until they turned a certain way because I'm assuming what they had left in their life was packed into this vehicle. And, a little bit later, I look over and I see this little old lady get out of the Cutlass and starts walking over, and she sort of just stops, and sort of looking around. So I was like, man, I'm going to go check on her. So I walked over and I asked her if I could help her. And she said, well, I was told I could get a meal here. I said, yeah, ma'am, let me show you where the line is. So I take her over to the food line and, tell her to help herself and whatever. And, I leave. Well, probably 10 minutes later, I look and there she is standing in the same spot again, but now she's crying. I'm like, oh my God, what happened? So I go over there and I was like, ma'am, are you okay? And she just looks at me and she goes, I just need to know who to thank. I'm like, ma'am, you don't have to thank anybody. It's just a pulled pork sandwich. And she's like, oh, son, this is so much more than a pulled pork sandwich. She goes, you're showing our community love. You're showing us that we're not forgotten in our worst time. What you're doing is so much more than the food. And that's when it hit me. I mean, to me, that I tell everybody that's my why. That was my first why. I've got others during deployments. But I will tell you, when somebody tells you how it has nothing to do with the food,
Yeah.
it has to do with there's still good in humanity.
Yeah.
There's still good in this world. And there's people that are coming out to do something for somebody they don't know. I don't know this lady's name. I've told this story 100 times. I've teared up, on national TV telling, somebody this story before. And it is, one of those things that at the end of the day, that's the reason I would leave my family. I would take vacation time to go set up in an ungodly, atmosphere
Yeah.
to give away food because of that little old lady reminding me that it had nothing to do with the food that we were giving away. It had to do with the fact that we showed up, that we were there for the community, that we were doing something. And that's when, it hit me. That's, that same day, we watched a carload of people come pulling in. And now we're set at the corner of 7th and Range Line, huge parking lot.
Right.
But next to it was a Ryan's Steakhouse. I think we can all agree we've been to something like it, if not a Ryan's Steakhouse. We've been to something like it. It's the kind of place when I was a kid, we went because we didn't have a lot of money, and that was where you went out to dinner, was a buffet place like that, right?
Right.
So we watched two couples walk up, try to open the door, read the sign that says they're closed, boil water bans, all this kind of stuff, and then walk over and get into our food line. Now, I got people in an uproar. We need to go kick those people out of line. I don't need that. Look, they were going to go buy it. And I was like, man, we don't know their situation. Quit assuming that you know what's going on.
Yeah.
They might have spent the last 3 days cleaning up what's left of their life, and they got a hotel or they found a place to take a shower, and they said, you know what? Let's go get something to eat. And then the one place that they thought they could afford wasn't even open. So, it takes a very special person to get in a food service line when they don't need it. Because it's an extremely humbling thing to go have to ask somebody for something like a meal.
Yeah.
And something like that. So I said, I look at it one of two ways. If you're a biblical person, you got to be right with God when you meet him.
Yeah.
And that's definitely going to be one of the questions,
You
or
and
karma's a bitch.
Yeah.
Whichever one you go with. But I
pick
will
one.
feed 10 of those people right there
Yeah.
just to make sure the one person that needed a meal got it that day.
Yeah.
Because it isn't about assuming the situation that person's in. It is about, it's about not assuming that and that the people are all there for the same reason.
You guys thought today was just, I was bringing on a guest talking about food, barbecue, and his organization. Little did you realize that you're getting life lessons right now.
I learned so much.
And I love where your heart's at. I want to back up because you said something, deployments. Veteran?
I'm not a veteran. Nope, I did not serve.
So when you say deployments, then you're talking about other, because right now we've been talking about one incident in 2011. It is 2025.
Yep.
So my next question that I have for you, Stan, is how many disasters or local, we'll call them deployments here, have you guys been on since you started this in May of 2011? How up until from then until now, how many times have you guys been called out?
So we've done 135 disaster deployments across 42 states plus the Bahamas.
Say that number again. 135.
135 deployments. We've been deployed for 1,681 days. And provided over 12 million, disaster meals. When you take all the meals that we've provided for disaster, non-disaster, we're just under 13 million meals that we've given away.
I can't even count that high. Like that is.
when you think about it, when we were in Florida, one of the things I wanted the crowd to know is, we provided 750,000 meals last year just to the greater Tampa area, to that Clearwater, Tampa, St. Pete, all those impacted areas, down towards Anne Marie Island and such, right?
Yeah.
And then when you look at what we've done since 2017, because that was our first disaster deployment to Florida was in 2017 with Hurricane Irma, we've done over 3 million meals of that 13 million just in Florida. More than any other state that we've been in. We've done more disaster deployments in Texas than we have Florida, just not the same number of meals.
Right.
And then Louisiana is the third. Those three states make up, almost probably close to 40% of the meals that we've done between three states. So
what's the longest you've been out? Day-wise.
Probably Hurricane Michael in the Panhandle of Florida. We were there for about 60 days.
Wow.
Probably about from the time we got there till the time we got it cleaned up and out of there, it was probably just shy of 60 days.
Now back in 2011, you said you were in the insurance business, so you had a day-to-day. And you were doing this.
I had a day-to-day until 2018.
Wow. So you've been doing this. So you've been doing this. You've been doing this full time since 2018, then.
Yep. I had an opportunity to walk away from on good terms from the company who that I'd been with for almost 24 years, and follow my passion to as the first full-time employee. Hired the second full-time employee by the end of that year, the third, the beginning of the next year. And I think right now, we got several positions open with some turnover and everything, but we've got about 30 full-time employees across 11 different states. So it takes a lot.
Those that are listening right now that want to get involved, what can they do or how can they reach out to you?
The best thing is to go to obr.org is even a shorter URL than the one that you put out earlier, obr.org. And right at the top, it talks about how to get involved. And the very first thing is says become a volunteer. You know, you can register as a volunteer there, or if you're, well, even at my age, it's the easier way to do it is just get on your iPhone and go, search on the App Store for OBR volunteer. You put that in, you can download our app, you can, go in there, create an account, do a background check, do all the information that we need and to get started. And the great thing about your iPhone versus your computer is you can turn on push notifications. Say, yeah, I want to know. And now it's not just disaster. I mean, maybe we're going to be in your area to do, a Veteran Day event, or we're in your area at a barbecue event and we have a volunteer needs, for people to help in a booth or whatever it might be. That gives us an opportunity to, engage volunteers and they get to learn about the organization a lot of times before they have to jump in a disaster. But we also tell people, don't wait. I mean, we're at the height of disasters of hurricane season right now. I think tomorrow, this next week is the height of hurricane season. And guess what? It's been pretty quiet, but it ain't going to stay that way.
It never does it? Let me ask you this: as the founder of this, and the fact that you're just doing your passion, man, it is such and your passion of wanting to help other people. My first off, hats off to you for that, because that is.
I appreciate
it gives people hope that there's still good in the world, and that's what people are doing. Stan's living this, folks. Leading this organization, what has it taught you about people, resilience, and maybe even leadership?
Oh, so we'll start with the resiliency, because it is amazing when you go out and you're handing out these meals and you're talking to these people and they talk about rebuilding, right?
Yeah.
They talk about the next time they can't wait till they have, that block party again when they're cooking barbecue for the neighbors and things like that. And they tell us, I mean, literally while eating the barbecue sandwich, we can see ourselves doing this, the smell of the barbecue, all of those different things that they start talking to it, or they start talking to the neighbors about, hey, when we get back, we've got to do this again. We got to come together as the neighborhood and have that block party. So, I tell people that pulled pork sandwich, gives them a little bit of normalcy. It gives them, for maybe 10 minutes, the opportunity to think about the future and that rebuilding and that community coming back together.
Yeah.
And so that it just goes to the resiliency. The fact is, you find people that are pissed off. I mean, I'd be pissed off if I lost my home or, something like that. But at the end of the day, they're out there, helping their neighbor. Neighbors are helping neighbors. Look for what might be left of, whether it's that wedding photo or, grandma's tea set or whatever they're trying to find.
Yeah.
That has a meaning to them. But when it comes to leadership, you really see, people that step up, whether it's community leaders that step up, that, heck, it could be the janitor at the school, but he steps up into a position of helping. I have some amazing leaders. I have veterans. I have retired first responders that work for me. I have retired entrepreneurs that have, got into, or gotten the bug, I should say. And now, we're hiring people that didn't know who Operation Barbecue was probably 6 months ago or 2 months ago. And that's okay, because now that just helps amplify the name outside of that group that knew who we were.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's about the growth of the organization, how you get the name out more, how you can do more. Because the more we do, we're talking, we're only talking about one side of the organization right now, and that's the disaster side.
Right.
We haven't even hit the non-disaster side, and brought up the fact that, there's so many blue sky days, so many more blue sky days every year than
Right.
there are gray sky.
So
how do we continue to help?
yeah, let's dive into. I want to kind of. It's a great transition. I was hoping you were going to say that. Is, you're not just a disaster relief, as you said. Well,
Yeah.
for the listeners, what do you mean by that? Do you guys do
So-
other things?
Yeah, so we have our programs broken into disaster and non-disaster, and our non-disaster programs have been driven by our volunteers. Our volunteers we started this in about 2016. It was a year that was pretty slow. Actually 2015, sorry, not 2016. 2015 was a very slow year, and we'd spent a lot of time and effort training volunteers, getting, these core people ready to deploy, ready to do stuff, and it was slow. And we started saying, hey, what are things that you're passionate about? What are things that you would do in your community if you had the opportunity? If we gave you $300 to do something to make a difference, what would it be? And about 8 out of 10 times it fell around the first responders in their community, the active military, the reservists, the guard or something like that, or veterans.
Yeah.
So when we started looking at how do we really make this into a true program, it was like, hey, well, let's focus on those heroes. And we call it the Always Serving Project when we started, because we said we're going to focus on the heroes that are always serving, right? The Always Serving Project was named that because, let's face it, you and I both know, firemen, police officers who are going to be the first person to pull over when there's an accident or there's somebody stuck on the side of the road, even when they're not on duty, right?
Yep.
They're doing that. Same thing with, veterans and active military. They are always serving in their community, and most people just don't even think about it.
Yeah.
Most of them don't think about it. They just do it. And so we wanted to see how we use our passion for grilling and barbecue to bring that together with them. Not just giving life skills. We use culinary. We use our passion of grilling and barbecue for culinary therapy.
Yeah.
Culinary therapy has been proven, as effective as music and art therapy. And there's going to be somebody that hears this who's going to really get pissed off. But I'm going to say it anyway.
Not me. You're talking to the
With one
foodie,
huge
man.
Distinction. One huge distinction between art and music,
Yeah.
and culinary. Everybody's got to eat. So at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it is, life skills. It's something that you have to have, and in food. And so bringing that together, food becomes is the greatest unifier in the world.
Yes.
And it gives you ways to work with those first responders, veterans, active military, their families, to bring them together, breaking bread together,
Yeah.
and giving them purpose, right? Because we talk about volunteering, we talk about finding it. Many of them are looking for that next group, that the next team to be part of, and volunteering gives a lot of them that opportunity to what might be missing in service.
That's what we say all the time. I tell people that are transitioning out of the military, the I don't want to say easiest way to transition out, but for lack of a better phrase, that's what I'm going to say. Get involved. Don't go home and sit around. Get involved, whether it's with a veteran-based community or a non-veteran, just get involved in the community or a nonprofit organization. Get active. And I love the fact, the food side of it. I'm always joking saying that I'm a foodie because I was a certified barbecue judge for a couple of years. If you asked me what's the greatest art form, I would tell you it's culinary, because I've seen how these pit masters and come together, these barbecue competitions. It's an art form how they put that stuff together. And then if you think about cooking, I love to cook just because it calms my nerves.
Yeah.
For the most part, unless I'm doing sushi and I mess it up. But it's one of those things, it's for the most part, it's pretty good. And then seeing the reaction on people's faces after, they take their first bite and how much they enjoy it and stuff. There's so much joy, I think, in the culinary side of it. What do you guys have coming up then on the you're talking about this, you do culinary stuff on the non-disaster side of things.
Yep.
Do you bring people together, and how often do you do that then?
So yeah, what we found, it was easier to bring people together than to go to the people sometimes.
Okay.
So we still do some truck and trailer that, and set up in a parking lot and still do these things. But we purchased 190 acres right on Lake of the Ozarks in central Missouri about 3.5 years ago.
Love it.
And we have built a camp there called Camp OBR. And it is really about, I took a 22-year-old horse barn and turned it into our culinary education center. I wanted to keep the charm of this old barn, but make it, very unique, but modern.
Yeah.
So, you go in there and it's got cameras, you got TVs everywhere. So you don't have to be standing right up there at the kitchen, the cooking island. If you want to sit back and take notes or whatever, you can see it from different angles. We got virtually every kind of smoker, grill, whether it's charcoal, pellet, propane, all of those things are there, at the camp. We've either gotten donated, bought, most of them are donated items, and we get companies that want their stuff to be there, right? They want it to be seen, used. So then we have a dozen, little cabins, and 8 of those cabins, queen bed, bunk bed set in there with a bathroom, everything built to ADA compliance, from slope and grade in that area. Because anybody that's been to Lake of the Ozarks knows that it's hilly. It's, they may call them mountains here, it's not a mountain, but there's a lot of hills, a lot of rock. So we built this area, with one big distinction, and that is the fire pit is the center point. So all the cabins open up towards the fire pit.
Oh, nice.
As the center communal area. Then we have some glamping cabins that we built, early on down in the woods that we have. And then we have a big lodge. Now, last year we had a fire. Still haven't rebuilt from the fire because we need to rebuild differently. We got to think differently. I don't need to rebuild a shop that was sitting there in the middle of it. Right. I need a multi-purpose center. But I didn't have it insured for a multi-purpose center or what the size of it is. So, we're actively looking for sponsors that want to come in and put their name on a building and help, rebuild a bathhouse and this multi-purpose center that would have breakout rooms, that would have a place for people to get away and with a little game room with on a rainy day, give you a place to do things inside type of an area.
Nice.
And, but we're being slow. We've built everything else, what I'll say out of the piggy bank. And this, this is going to cost us, we need somebody that wants to put $1 million, $2 million and have their name on it forever, to leave a legacy to come along to be able to do that. But, when you get to the camp, besides the culinary therapy, you have 190 acres that, you never have to leave. We've got miles of hiking trails, miles of ATV trails on there.
Don't threaten me with a good time, Stan. Don't threaten me with a good time.
Right? Well, I mean, we have skeet shooting out there.
Oh, nice.
We have a bow and arrow archery range, and then our newest addition that we're probably not going to get done by the last camps of the year is a elevated platform in the middle, out in the woods, that is going to be a axe throwing area, and the other half of it's going to be covered so you can use it for breakout sessions. I've already had several people claim it for morning yoga.
Yeah.
Because it'll be out you're along the driveway, but literally you're looking out into the woods.
Yeah.
And
And that's a beautiful area. If you guys haven't been out in that area in central Missouri, look, it's just, and this obviously, I'm a little biased because I'm an outdoors guy. I hunt, I fish, and I just love being in the outdoors. So the fact that you get to do that area is just amazing.
We have the fishing poles and everything. We had so many of the young adults this year at one of our camps out there, catching fish that have never caught a fish, never been fishing before in their life.
That's
catching
cool.
a little sun perch or a little they were even catching some little striped bass, which I was just surprised of. One girl caught probably definitely a keeper, a little blue cat,
Oh,
and and it came. Her brother was trying to help her, and it wiggled off the hook and went flying. I mean, she cussed her brother for days. She still blames him for losing. The biggest fish she's ever caught. And then we take them out on the boat. We'll do sunset cruises out there as the sun's going down. We've taken them out on it's just a pontoon, so it's not like you're throwing them around too good.
No, but it's
you can
perfect.
take them out there and tube, and get them out in the water and
relax.
And being right there on the lake gives you a lot of that opportunity.
Stan, I got a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
What keeps you motivated and inspired to keep doing what it is that you're doing, and to continue to grow the mission?
It's the people. I mean, whether it's meeting a veteran or a Gold Star mom, who's attending the camp, that tells you, how inspiring it is to see what we're doing to give back to them through our programs, or another little old lady who's thanking me for something as simple as a pulled pork sandwich.
I love it.
Whenever I question it, I go to her. I go to the young gentleman that wanted to take one of my other stories is a young gentleman who's about 27 years old who served a couple of tours, got out, became an alcoholic, drug addict. His mom is the one who turned him in after he stole from her for about the fifth time. She turned him in, put him in jail for 4 years or 3 years. And when he got out, he was at this facility in San Diego that we were doing an event at, that he had to apply, and he had to have a job, had to do these things to get into. And he was doing so well that he was one of the people nominated to take this, our barbecue academy class. And we were doing ribeye. We were teaching him how to cook a ribeye steak. I'll never forget this because this kid was over there and his stomach was so messed up and he was so anxious and everything that, he was probably eating antacid all the time. So he had very little seasoning on there. I was like, man, you can put some more. And he goes, man, it just kills me. I can't. So, okay. And I came back over and he had what looked like one of the prettiest steaks I've ever seen in my life. Seriously, I just pulled out my phone and I started taking, he's like, what are you doing? I said, buddy, that's a beautiful steak. I said, I'm taking a picture of it. And this kid literally started tearing up. And he's like, will you do me a favor? Will you take a picture with me and my steak so I can send it to my mom? Because I want my mom to see that I've changed and I'm doing so much better. So, so when you have stories like that, it's hard to, when you're having a bad day, it's hard not to go back and say, hey, it could be so much worse. You could be in that person's shoes, but look at the good that you're doing out there when you're out there doing these things. And for me, that's what I look back on.
I love it. What's next for Operation Barbecue Relief? What do you guys got coming up?
Well, we're trying to, we built this camp, I tell people I sort of built this camp as a field of dreams, right? Build it and they will come. And so now it's really about networking with, veteran organizations and first responder organizations that have programs, have people, but are looking for places to do it, that are already spending money on camps or spending money on, condos and, for programs, to look at coming to us and booking the camp. I want to get the camp, to me, I want this camp to be one of the elite camps in the country to come to for culinary therapy and doing it in conjunction where other organizations can still do their therapy sessions, their breakout sessions that they do with their people. And so that's one of the things obviously I want to get the name out there of the camp because there's a lot of sponsorship opportunity. I would like to get this to where it can, it funds itself, through sponsorship and through organizations each year instead of, having it as a loss leader right now.
Yeah.
So those are things that I want to do. I want to grow the program eventually. I think it's got so much opportunity that there could be, another Camp OBR in, Florida or Camp OBR in Montana or, that kind of a thought process of different experiences of different areas of the country that are destination locations that people may never ever get to go to if it wasn't for that.
I like that.
And that's the big thing, I think, is, how can we, because I can't predict when the next disaster is. If I could, we wouldn't need any money. I'd be selling that all over the place.
Yeah.
So I think for us, it's how this is the way that we can control our calendar. We can control that. And, most places like this are very seasonal.
Yeah.
They operate from April to October,
Yeah.
and they're done. I want to operate. I want camps to be 12, every month of the year. I want camps when the lake is freezing over, that people are still wanting to be out there, wanting to go on that hike when it's 10 degrees outside, wanting to go down and, chip away a little bit and do a little ice fishing down off the dock.
Yeah.
Those are the things that I want people to want to do. In the meantime, I grill and cook all year round. There's no reason to not have the smoker fired up when it's 0 degrees outside and showing them how to cook a rack of ribs or showing them, how to do, something on the grill that, and we do a lot of things that are, they might be a splurge type item for somebody.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we do things around cuts of meat, like a pork tenderloin that people are scared of because mom and dad told them, you got to cook that thing to 160 degrees. You can't cook it, and you cook that thing to 160 degrees. You might as well just, cut it off, use it to resole your shoes or something like that because it's so damn tough. And those are the things that we want to give them is, opportunities of how you can use different cuts of meat that are cost effective for a small family or a big family as well.
I love that. One last question for you, Stan.
Yep.
You're on a show called The Decision Hour.
Yep.
And we have to make decisions every day. And you've shared quite a few already. But name a time in your life where your feet are on the line and you have to make that decision. What is it? And what's the atmosphere like at that time? It could be anything.
So I have two of them that I wrestle back and forth on.
Okay.
But I'll use the most recent one.
Okay.
And the most recent one would be 2020 with COVID. Every non-disaster event that we had been canceled at this point. Every VA, police action league, whatever we had 23, I think, scheduled for the year. Every one of them is just like rotating door of emails. We're canceling. Hey, it's 8 months out. We're still canceling, right? We're like, we've got to, we got to be relevant, And at the same time, I got a board of directors going, hey, if there's not if you don't have these things and there isn't a disaster and you may not be able to respond to a disaster because you can't have, 150 people in a parking lot cooking, what are we going to do? They said, so I want your plan of how you're going to start laying people off, who's going to get laid off, and we want it by time period, and we want you to show the run rate of the bank account for how long you could make it. So I literally had to sit there. I mean, I laid myself off, before I wasn't the last person to get laid off in my plan. My my head of social media was one of the last people that was going to get laid off because I want the stories to be continue to be told.
Right.
Right. But no one outside of the leadership team ever saw that. No one knew. No one knows when they were getting laid off, who, or anything like that. It was 2 years or 3 years after that before I even told that story that I had to go through that exercise for that. But what I told the board is, we're going to do what we do best. We're going to adapt. We're going to find a way, and we're going to make lemonade out of these lemons that we have right now. And we became the mass feeder of choice for the state of Pennsylvania for about 120 days. We did almost 4 million meals through contractors, through restaurants. We had 39 restaurants across the United States that we partnered with, where they were able to bring back up to 10 employees, gave them a little bit of a lifeline. They were still going to have to pay that electrical bill and pay that gas bill and pay those things whether they were open or not. So why not let them look like they were this, philanthropic,
right,
group that was partnering with a nonprofit to help their community. So when it came out of COVID and things started opening up again, people would remember them for those things.
Yeah.
And, not everyone's still open. There's about, I think it's 34 out of 39 restaurants are still open today. Not every one of them failed because of COVID, though. I mean, some of them were just life, right?
Yeah.
But the decision to say, we are going to do whatever we can to be relevant, and if that means going so far outside of disaster mission, I considered COVID a disaster. And so we're going to figure out our way to be able to feed people and make sure that people have meals. I mean, in Pennsylvania, we were assembly lining meals and freezing them because they only wanted to give, to keep people from coming out daily. They're only doing it 3 days a week.
Right.
And so they would give away multiple days worth of meals at a time to a family. But again, to make the decision of how you become relevant rather than just, sitting back, waiting and praying that it was, nope, we're going to do this. And at the end of the day, I might be looking for another job because, but I've got to do something.
Yeah.
And that's what we did to be, relevant, to really drive things forward. And, it was, telling the board, hey, this is what we're going to do, and this is my plan. And, showing that, hey, there's an opportunity. And to this day, it's still the biggest year, meal wise. I mean, we ended up in 2020, working in 16 states, 15 different disasters, just considering,
right.
COVID, one big disaster,
right?
But 5.4 million meals.
Jesus.
So, for us, thinking differently has actually been, one of our cornerstones since then of, hey, we're not just a disaster relief organization. We're a logistics organization. We solve problems. So if you're a state and you've got problems, if you're a community, you've got problems, how can we maybe help you?
Yeah, I love the fact that you are, and the organization, the mission itself is just a heart of gold. Those of you that listen to this show, have followed me for years, know purpose. It's not about the money. It's about helping others. Stan, Operation Barbecue Relief, it broke the mold, and there you go. Ladies and gentlemen, go to obr.org, get involved today. y'all got to eat. Y'all want to help. I know some of you reach out to me on a monthly. Hey, what can we do to help? What organizations are out there that we can get involved with and help? This is one of those organizations that I've vetted, that I trust. Certainly one that I'm looking forward to doing more with over the next couple of years, moving forward. Stan, thank you for what you and your team has done, what you continue to do. You continue to set the example of what it means to help and just what it looks like to be a good human. So thank you.
Hey, I appreciate it, Adam. Thank you so much for having me on the show today.
Absolutely. Folks, we're out of time. And I'm pretty sure Stan and him and I could definitely keep going. Go check out Operation Barbecue Relief. Go to obr.org. While you're at it, check out our parent network, Heroes Media Group. Check out all the great shows, articles, and videos that we've done over the last couple months. Go to heroesmediagroup.com. Until next time, you've been listening to The Decision Hour.